What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio. Transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho, I am the one armed madman. And with me today, we've got Dan Behrman. I almost forgot your last name there for a second. I'm glad you had it written down in the Zoom screen. Otherwise, I would have just called you Dan. Taxation is theft. But dude, I love the stickers. I love the hat. I love it, man. Taxation is theft. I'm right there with you.
Damn right it is.
So I read your profile on this like matching service that we use, and it said that you've been driving without a license for years, and this really piqued my interest because so I guess it's been a couple years ago now. I was just on the internet looking at random stuff, and I never really like gotten into body cam video. And for some reason I came across this video that was like sovereign citizen owns cop, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And I like went to this video and I'm watching it, and this guy's like, I'm not driving, I'm traveling type of thing. And he ends up like showing his cop all of this paperwork. And there was an edit in the middle of the video. You could tell that it skipped, and it said like in the bottom, he's like, I skipped out the part where I just sat in my car and waited for this guy to do all the research and blah blah blah. And something tells me during that edit, he gave the guy his driver's license. Uh, so this kind of like sent me down a rabbit hole to see if like there was actually something to this, or if these guys were just kind of like out of their minds. And my mom's married to an ex-sheriff, and I kind of asked him about it, and he had no idea what I was talking about. So I guess like it didn't, that's type of stuff started
Interesting.
afterwards. So like, how are you able to drive with no
Yeah.
license? How does this work?
So it is a really interesting topic, and man, I've got so many answers for you already just based on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is something that's definitely getting a lot more popular now than it has been in the past, and yes, it is unfortunately a lot. I get asked all the time, are you one of those sovereign citizens? Which, those guys, I've done a little bit of research on them, and I feel like they're actually like their heart's kind of in the right place. That
Yeah.
the government's doing way too much, but at the same time, they really believe in some crazy stuff that's kind of unfounded. So yeah, it's really difficult because I always get lumped into that category. And what's interesting too is you see a lot of videos like you were talking about where this guy probably ended up showing his license. You see a lot of videos where people are just like they end up getting dragged out of their car.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the nature of
and
power,
it's
right? Like, you can have
yeah,
all of the paper you want in the world, but, like, power is,
right,
what the guys with guns say it is. That's the real law.
right, right, right. Might makes right.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so yeah, so it's interesting. So I actually started this. Uh, I lost my license because I just at some point I was just like I'm not paying any of these tickets. I'm done with you guys. This is insane. Because it was I started realizing the courts were kind of like you weren't getting a fair trial. I later learned out the courts they actually use fake courts to make this happen. But I was like I'm done with this. This is like you're not even hearing my story. You're just like I'm guilty. So one of the first things I tried, and I learned this actually from Britney Spears,
Oh,
was yeah. So she had a suspended license, I think in California, but I think she was from Louisiana, or somehow she had like a driver's license also in Louisiana, and she was driving with that, and she was stopped and cited for driving with a suspended license, and they took this to court. But and she's got money for lawyers and everything,
mhm.
but she said, it doesn't matter. My license is suspended here. I have a valid license, and this is the license I'm driving with. And they ended up just dismissing her case because they were like, we don't know what to do with this. But so that kind of like got me thinking about jurisdiction and all this other stuff. And there's a lot of people. This is back when I was living in under communist rule in California.
Yeah,
Um,
I've
you
been
know,
there.
it was yeah. So like at some point, everybody was like, "Yeah, you need to start your, to save, protect your money from taxes by starting your corporation in Las Vegas." That was the
Mhm.
thing that everyone in Los Angeles was doing. So I was like, "Well, what if I registered my car out there?" Which I ended up doing, and I was like, now they have less jurisdiction because I realized at some point if you don't pay the tickets, um, parking tickets, for example, If you get parking tickets in California and your car is registered in California, they have the jurisdiction to suspend your registration. So basically, the next time you go to update your registration, they're going to be like, "Well, you got all these tickets, you got to pay them before
Yeah.
we'll even let you do that." So I started thinking about jurisdiction, and I actually went down to Mexico and got a driver's license, which was
Oh.
super shady. But that's how I started this whole thing. So for a while, I was driving around with a Mexican driver's license, and I got stopped several times with this. And these cops were just like confused, like I've never I've never seen a Mexican driver's license. What do I do with this, right? Um, and it's really interesting because I don't really like to create like these confrontational situations with cops because I know, at the end of the day, they can pull their gun out
Yeah.
and shoot me. I've had a couple drawn on me before for pretty much nothing. Um, but that's not where I really want to take the fight. So I see a lot of these guys getting dragged out of their cars, and what's interesting is you can almost pinpoint like why that happens. Like a lot of them get like very almost aggressive towards the cops. They say things like "I'm refusing to show you my ID" and all this other stuff. At the end of the day, cops are trained to follow procedure. They don't
Yep.
know the law. Even if you're right about the law, it doesn't matter. They're not going to believe you. They're trained to believe that everything that comes out of your mouth is a lie, right? That's just how it is. So just give them your information, get your ticket, and deal with it later in the courts when you don't have the potential to basically get your ass kicked in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere with possibly no cameras even recording it. So if they do something illegal, no one's ever going to know about it. It's your word versus theirs, right? Um, so that's kind of been my philosophy with this stuff. So show them a Mexican driver's license and they're like, okay, this is interesting. What do I do with this? Sometimes they're just like, get out of here because, if I write you a ticket with this, you're probably never going to show up and we don't have any way to enforce it on you, which is, this goes back to jurisdiction, right? They want to be able to control you and hold you to it, right? They
Yeah.
want to make sure you show up. Um, and so sometimes they'll just let me go. Other times they'll write me tickets, and a lot of times when I show up to fight them, they've already been dismissed.
Yeah. There's a treaty
Which is
with these countries that allows you to drive. It's like an international driver's license. I've seen that on body cam video now, like in Canada and the UK, like you're allowed to drive, in the United States
yeah,
with those licenses.
yeah. It's interesting, and I mean this brings up all kinds of weird laws. Like I went to get insurance on a car one time without a driver's license. Actually, I think I guess I still had my suspended license at the time, but I went to go get insurance on it, and like can you get insurance without a driver's license? Sure enough, I walked into a little insurance like what do you call it, like a little insurance office at a strip mall, and I was just like, yeah, I got this car, can you insure it? They're like, sure, what's your driver's license? I was like, I don't have one. So they were like, oh, okay, no problem, what's the VIN number? So they put it in, they set me up, and I swear to god that was the cheapest insurance I ever had. It was like $50 a month. So, because they're not looking at your they don't have any reason to give you an escalated price like you have a history of traffic tickets or speeding or anything like that. So that was real interesting. Um, but yeah, so then, further down the rabbit hole, I was like, well, what do I need a license for at all? Like I'm using this Mexican one. Like, what if, once that expired, I was like, well, why do I need to get another one? And so I haven't had one at all for a while. And usually I'll drive with a passport on me, especially in the US. In Mexico, I'm in Mexico now. I'm in Mexico most of the year.
Oh, nice.
But when I'm in the US, I usually keep my passport on me so that if I do get stopped, I can show them who I am and I have some identification because their whole thing is if you can't prove who you are, you know,
You're going to
we can't
jail.
we can't write you a ticket, and yeah, we'll take you to jail and get your fingerprints, right? Um, so or at least the chances of that increase. Um, so I carry a passport, and I've actually been stopped by border patrol for they have these checkpoints down in South Texas, and sometimes I just cover my face when I'm going through because they snap your picture.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes, I'm just like, oh, I'm yawning, scratching my eyes or something just to cover my face. But one time I made it completely obvious, and it was in the middle of the night, and I didn't have license plates on my car. I just had this big QR code that I printed. And I got stopped, and it turned out to be border patrol. And I was like, well, he asked me for ID. I gave him my passport. And he's like, well, how do I know this car isn't stolen? And I asked him, do you have any reason to believe it is stolen? And he's like, well, there's no plates. I can't look it up. And I was like, I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but the VIN number is, on the outside of the car. Like, I don't really have to consent for you to read it. And he's like, well, I was just about to do that. So he walks around the car and he looks at the VIN number and he puts it in. And he's like, it's not coming up in any system. This was a car that I bought that was, um, I actually bought it used and I think it was already registered for export, which basically means you're sending it to another country. So it was taken out of the system completely. And he's like, it's not in there. And I'm like, so that means it wasn't reported stolen, right? And he was just kind of frustrated, but he gave me back my passport and said, get
Yeah.
out of here. And he was like, well, watch out for DPS. That's what they have in Texas. Watch out for DPS because if they stop you, they're not going to be so nice about you not having a driver's license. I never told him I didn't have a driver's license, but that was an assumption. But at the same time, interesting point. He was a federal agent. He has nothing to do with state traffic laws, right? That's out of his jurisdiction. So we have another jurisdiction issue here. So it's always created these like really interesting scenarios, but there's um I guess like and feel free to stop me and ask any questions along the way, but there's a lot of misinformation as far as like cases that are out there. And then there's a lot of like I would say, really vague information from the government side. And so this creates this situation where there is no smoking gun, right? I can't find you a law and point to it that says, you're allowed to drive without a license or, travel,
Yeah.
use your car without a driver's license, except for, commercial purposes and all this stuff. There is no smoking gun like that. Um, but if you dig into all these cases, like you look at all the cases where they say you have to have a license or somebody was, charged with driving without a license and it went all the way to the state Supreme Court or the state appeals courts, every single one of those cases that I've found is it's somebody driving for commercial purposes, which is going back to the sovereign citizens or the there's other various groups of people who do this. They say it's licenses are only for commercial travel, and so it's interesting that all the cases that actually make it to those state supreme courts or appeals courts are actually for commercial purposes. So so we haven't really seen an actual case where like an individual is just like, I'm just using my automobile for personal travel. And it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Now it might just be that, those people, they don't know how to challenge those all the way up to the Supreme
Yeah.
Court. And it's never gotten that far for a Supreme Court to say, like, no, you're crazy, you need a license.
They don't have the money
So
to do
again,
it.
yeah. So it's a gray area, right? There are a lot of interesting cases that are cited as quote unquote the smoking gun. But those are actually misinformation. So there's one, I'll give you an example. I want to say it was this was a federal Supreme Court. Um, and it was a case of somebody, who was traveling, quote unquote, traveling to, I think, Virginia, and the quote that you'll see by the right to travel people is it is a right to travel from one state to another. That's pretty much the quote that you get. But if you go look up the case and you read what it was actually about, like, yeah, sure, those words are in there, but the case had nothing to do with it, which means if you ever took that to court, that case wouldn't matter at all. What the case was about was somebody went from one state to another state and they applied for welfare benefits, and the new state that they just arrived to said, you can't receive those welfare benefits until you've been here for like 30 days or
Yeah.
something, 90 days. And so the Supreme Court said, no, the 14th Amendment says, everyone gets equal protection under the law, equal rights, benefits, and everything else. So the fact that they moved to your state, you can't make them wait 90 days. If they're a resident of your state on day one, they have to be, they qualify for those benefits. That's what that case was about. It had nothing to do with driving or licenses or anything else. Um, and so it's important to know, there's obviously, lawyers spend a lot of time in school, even though a lot of them are still idiots.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to learn about how the law actually works, and it's important what a case is about, not just to find, cherry pick a couple words that are like, oh, that says, those are the words I was looking for, right? That doesn't mean it actually applies and protects you. So that's important. But like I said, there's a huge gray area. So sorry, I'm just ranting here. I'm trying to like give
No,
you
you're
all the
good. Keep
information I
going.
possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so So this is, I guess, like, okay, so there is no smoking gun, like I said, but there's some interesting stuff that I've seen for myself that I can tell you about, some interesting stories of how I've done things. Um and just to like understand how coercive this system is and how fraudulent it is, how they're basically like defrauding us into the system. So one of the earlier things that I learned is when I went to go fight a ticket in California, I went into a court, and this is after I started getting information and started listening to like and watching what's actually going on. The bailiff comes out and he says, "The judge is not here today. We have a judge pro tem, which means a temporary judge." And he goes on to explain their qualifications. It's still a lawyer, still a member of the bar, still a great person, interested in justice, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to have your case heard by the actual judge, the elected official judge, you can object now. And the room stayed silent, right? And so I've done it both ways in California, where I've objected to see what happens, and I've followed along and not objected. Um, I've gone through cases where I have not objected and they pass a clipboard around making you sign that you agree to have your case heard by this, not a judge. Um, Interestingly enough, when I didn't sign it, and, of course, I'm guilty, right? Everyone's guilty. I later wrote a letter to the court. So they sent me a notice saying, "You were found guilty, you owe us money." I wrote a letter back to them under the Fair Debt Collections and Practices Act, which is a federal law that was written to protect consumers from malicious debt collectors, right? I used that law against this court and I said, "Look, you don't have a um, you don't have a court order because there was no court, right? You don't have my signature consenting to arbitration, which is basically what this was. When when you have a lawyer who makes a decision like a court without actually a court, you can, if I'm suing you and we say, okay, we don't have to go to court, we can just
Yeah.
both yell at a at a mutual friend, a lawyer, and that's arbitration. He'll decide, and we, before we go in there, we sign a contract saying whatever he says, we'll agree to do. That's basically what these courts are. So I never signed that paper they're floating around, right? And so they never responded. And again, this is gray area. They never responded saying, "Okay, you win. You don't have to pay us. We don't have any proof that you owe us anything." But I never heard from them again. Um, and so, again, gray area. Like, are they still just like, okay, this guy still owes us money. We're just never gonna, fight him for it. But I've been stopped since in California, and like nothing, right? There's no warrants or anything, right? This is all really interesting stuff. But again, it doesn't like there's no smoking gun.
Yeah.
I don't have that letter from them saying, "You're right, we can't collect this money." Um, and I've done the same things with. I had a friend in California who got a red light camera. That they take your picture, they send it to you in the mail. Here's your ticket. Show up in court, and we wrote the same response, right? Fair Debt Collections and Practices Act. Now this is somebody who still has an active driver's license. This is 10 years later, still has an active driver's license in California and never paid this ticket, right? We wrote back under the Fair Debt Collections and Practices Act. Um, we're not going to pay this. You don't know who that is in the car. There's no citation. There's no judicial order. There's no contract. There's none of this stuff. And they just stopped sending letters. Um, somebody might look at that and say, well, in Los Angeles, they actually did this thing where everyone just kind of boycotted those tickets because, when you usually get a ticket, they make you sign, you're promising to appear in
Mhm.
court. Now they have you under contract. That doesn't happen with the photo tickets. So somebody would look at this particular case and say, well, you were never properly served. And so therefore it's not like a regular ticket. Gray area again, right? So there's all these like these there's all these really weird circumstances, but from all my experiences, the basically the total sum of everything that I can understand is they're trying a million different ways to defraud us into citing us and giving these tickets. And every single way they do it, it's a different loophole. And if you can see where the loophole is, you can basically just use their bureaucratic process to get it out of the way. Um, but it's, everyone's afraid, right? Everyone's afraid, well, what if they issue a warrant, right? What if they do all this? Which, interestingly enough, like, everyone's afraid, oh, if I don't show up in court, they're going to issue a warrant.
Yeah.
Which may be true if you don't show up, but what if you do show up and you say where's the judge, and they're like, the judge isn't here. So I went to one court in Texas where, okay, well, let me say this first. In California, when I've objected to, the case being heard by the fake judge, they actually took me into another room. It turned out the judge was there, into this other room where he was only hearing two other cases, and those were the regular traffic tickets from people who hired lawyers, right? So it's me and these two lawyers and this judge in this other room. This guy was actually a judge. So, like, when I told him, like, yeah, I wasn't speeding, where's the cop, and all that, he was actually like looking through the information. This was pre-trial, right? So he's looking through the information. He's actually, like, I could tell he's thinking about it. He's putting actual
Yeah.
thought into it, right? Versus the other guy who's like, guilty, guilty. So so first they lied and said the judge wasn't there when he was. Now in Texas, I went as an observer, just to see, what. I didn't even have a ticket. I just went to this court, which I heard was shady, and it was. But I go in there, and the same thing, right? They say the judge isn't here, but we have a prosecutor who's going to be sitting as the judge,
Yeah. Great.
which is like, right, not the same prosecutor who's prosecuting you, but a prosecutor who's going to be sitting in the judge's place. And it was the same thing, right? If you object, you can reschedule. Now this was interesting, because basically what they were saying is the judge wasn't there. So if you refuse to respond to your name, there's nobody there. Like, there's no judge there. They can't send it to the next room. There's no judge there to issue a warrant. Those judges can't issue warrants. They're not judges. They're fake judges. So there's always this threat. Oh, if I don't show up, they're going to issue a warrant, or it's going to go. More likely, what's going to happen is it's going to be this administrative system of, we have your driver's license. We know you got a ticket, you didn't respond to it, so we're not going to let you renew your license, right? And states are starting to build compacts with each other so that they can, relay information. And, like, if you're in one state, they'll call your home state and be like, hey, this guy got a ticket over here, you shouldn't allow him to renew his license. And it's reciprocal, right? So they do that favor for each other, because they know it increases revenue at the end of the day. Um, but of course, if you don't have a license in that state, there's nobody they can call. So, yeah, so I guess, just more examples of this, these shenanigans, right? Like, what what are you guys doing here? I thought
Yeah.
this was like truth, justice, and the American way, right?
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, so it's just so insane. But this is the system we live under, and they know that most people, I mean, most people just cave
Yeah.
to fear.
And they don't know their
It's
rights at all. You know what's, like, interesting
right,
about, like, the soft citizen thing is, like, you can tell now that cops have had training on it, because anytime somebody stands on their rights in a consensual stop, or even in, like, a traffic stop, if they're, "I don't answer questions. What are you, a sovereign citizen?" You know?
right,
Which is it's such a weird thing too, because, like, if you're sovereign, you can't really be a citizen. Like, it doesn't really,
right,
like,
right,
work, you know what I mean? But if we're gonna use that term, like, the real sovereign citizens in the stop are the cops, you know? If you get drunk and you crash into me and injure me and cause damage to my car, I can sue you for restitution. If a cop does it, the state pays
right,
for it, the taxpayers pay for it, and I look at them as just road pirates, and like you said, they're policy enforcement. They know very, very little about the actual law. They get a tiny bit of training on it, and then they get thrown into the field where they're enforcing policy. Like, I've worked in a lot of restaurants. Every restaurant that I've ever worked at has a script that you go to the table and you ask if they want the drink, you ask what kind of, appetizer they want. You tell them, "Here's the special for the day." And it's just a script that you operate off of, and there's different ways to interact with people based on their, questions or what they order. You go, they say this, you do that. If they say that, you do this. And essentially, like, you're just following this policy that is created by somebody that may not have ever even waited tables or, made a drink in their entire
right.
life a lot of the time, especially at a corporate restaurant where they're, set by a boardroom who has never worked in a restaurant in their life. They just own them, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
yeah, man, it's crazy to, it's crazy to see how far we've fallen from, an actual free country when you watch these, body cam videos of normal, everyday police interactions with the citizens of this country where they just look at us, like you said earlier, they look at you as a threat. You're not a citizen like them. One of the things that bothers me so much is, after they'll have, an interaction with somebody that they have to arrest, all they do is they put them in handcuffs, they put them in the back of the car, and 9 times out of 10, the first thing they reach for is their bottle of hand sanitizer because, "Ew, I had to touch a dirty commoner. I need to wash my hands so much, and oh my god," or, somebody'll bump into them and, "You tried to kill me," "You tried
You're
to
right.
hurt me. Now I'm gonna," cops are supposed to be these tough guys that, came from the military, and as soon as you bump into them, all of a sudden, it's, assault and you're getting charged with a felony that, you're never gonna get charged with that felony because the whole point is to charge them with as much as you possibly can so that you can plea down and, when you get to court and it's like, "Oh, well, you've got a felony for assaulting a police officer." I saw one the other night where this guy was like, "You stepped on my toe. I'm charging you with assault." It's like, that
Yeah.
real tough guy. Some 110-pound lady stepped on your toe, and you're gonna try and ruin her life with a felony now, which is just crazy. But, these people never get actually charged with the felony because they'll, take the resisting charge instead or the disorderly or whatever. It's just a game
Right.
to, get the biggest, conviction that you possibly can. And the prosecutors are just as corrupt as the cops. They don't even look at the case 9 times out of 10. Like, there'll be video sometimes of the interaction that clearly shows the citizen is within their rights and didn't do anything wrong, and it'll take months and months and months for it to finally get thrown out of court because the prosecutor doesn't give a shit if you're right or wrong, if you're guilty or not. They care about convictions. They want convictions on
Numbers.
their
Yeah.
record so they can get a raise or they can get a promotion or whatever it is. It's just sick.
So yeah, and what's interesting about that too is a lot of people, I've been arrested a couple times, and I've seen what happens to me and what happens to everybody else that's there. You get this public defender who comes in, like before you even go into court, and they just go like they're going through everybody's file, and they're like, yeah, okay, you should plead guilty. Like
Yeah.
they're telling you that off the bat, and then it's like you find out later that they're actually hired by the prosecutor's
Yeah.
office, and the reason for that is like so okay we quote unquote have a right to a lawyer. The like it's not that like the government cares like, oh, we're going to give everybody a lawyer. What's actually happening is you get these people who so the prosecutor gets their cases and they're like, okay, we're going to charge all these people, right? Well, we're not allowed to charge them unless they have a lawyer, so let's hire a lawyer for them. And so the prosecutor is hiring a lawyer for them. And they know, first of all, they're like, well, we'll hire one lawyer for like 1,000 cases that we
Yeah.
have. Um, so the prosecutor's office knows we have 100 lawyers in our office, but there's only two for for public defense. Like they know the system is weighted. And there's actually an organization, I want to say it's the American Motorist Association. They have an interesting program where I think it's almost like an insurance program, if I can call it that. But it's like you pay like a small monthly fee, and their whole thing is if you get ever get a traffic ticket, they'll pay for it for you as long as you follow their script, which basically is clog up the courts as best as you can, because they know like if everybody, like if you've ever gone to fight a traffic
Yeah.
ticket, they line you up like sheep, right?
Yeah. If
And they're like,
everybody went
let's
to
get through
trial
500 people.
Yeah, if everyone went to
Yeah,
trial, the whole system would collapse because they don't have time for that shit.
exactly. Exactly. And this is also why like when they get difficult cases, so like one of the other things I deal with is like taxes in the IRS, and everyone's like, deadly afraid of them, right?
Mhm.
Like oh, I better pay my taxes or I'm going to federal prison. They only prosecute about 2,000 people every year, which if you think about it is like nothing. And the reason they can even get that many is because a lot of people, they just plead to those,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like, it's the same thing. It's like 90% of cases never go to trial because everyone takes a plea deal.
Yeah.
But like you think about how many
You owe us
federal
10 grand. If you give us 8 today, we'll throw it out.
Yeah, it's and like everybody's and then of course, you know, they do all these sick tricks which are, um this is why so many innocent people end up in prison too, by the way. Like, they'll say like, "Oh, your friend snitched on you. He witnessed you murder.
Yeah.
He's going to testify." And it's like, "But I didn't do it." And it's like, "Well, that's not what the jury's going to think. So do you want life or you want to just
Yeah.
go,
20.
confess to something you didn't do and instead of life you'll get 15 years?" This is a real thing that they do, and it's really scary. Like, it's something like most of us don't ever have to worry about, but the amount of times that that kind of stuff happens, and like, it's this is why, like, I see so many people who are back to blue, and they think like, most of these people are good honest people, and there's a few of them out there, sure, a very small number. Usually, if they witness a bad cop doing something, the good cop's the one who gets
Yeah.
fired, right? But they're like, that's the question, right? Are you a law enforcer or are you a peacekeeper? And there are a few peacekeepers out there, but most of them are law enforcers. It's a job to them, right? They just want to get that paycheck, and then they get the power, and they're like, "Ooh, my precious," right? They're
Yeah.
like, they want to go and abuse that power. Um, but yeah, but then there are a lot of people who are just like, they don't see the evil of the system. And a lot of these people, like, "Oh, my husband's a cop." Oh,
Mhm.
so you're not really, yeah, you're not worried about the evilness of the system, because if you ever get a traffic citation, your husband's going to call and be like, "Hey, let's
Yeah.
make this go away," or something, right? Like, you're not so worried about that stuff, or being wrongly accused of something. But all the people who are just like, they're trying to get to work and back, and those are the people who get stopped every day because of the color of their skin, or whatever else. Like, the people who are lawfully carrying weapons and get harassed every single day, or get shot because this and that, or the kid wearing the hoodie, he had headphones in under his hoodie, and he's walking away from the cop. The cop's yelling, "Hey, put up your hands, turn
Yeah.
around, come back here." Didn't respond, obviously. I don't remember if he tased him or shot him in the back or something like that, but
Yeah.
or just like ran and jumped on him, something like that. But it's like, he wasn't doing anything wrong. There was a guy waiting for his Uber to pick him up while he just got off work at CVS, so
I
he's
saw
sitting on the
that.
bench outside of the
Yep.
yeah. Like, there's so many people that are just like impacted this. Those people know. Those are the people who know that this system is corrupt, and it's not peacekeeping, it's law enforcement, and it's rent seeking, right? It's
Yes.
looking for anyone you can extract money from. They know. Um, sure, there's like, there's a few criminal prosecutions of rapes and murders and, like, bigger crimes, but like, that's not what they're out there doing most of the time.
Yeah,
That's
dude,
that's not
I watch a lot of predator catch videos on, like, YouTube and some of them that are off YouTube, and, like, dude, 9 times out of 10, they'll catch these guys in the act, like, meeting up with a 13-year-old girl or an 11-year-old girl, and they're admitting to child porn on their phone, and they just let them go. "Oh, we'll
yeah,
forward the information to the prosecutor and the detectives, and they'll get into
yeah.
it," you know,
We
and they
got some
don't do
citations to
anything.
give.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah.
like, some of the best advice my dad ever gave me was like, cops aren't your friends. Their entire goal every day when they wake up in the morning is to destroy your life. And like, I remember thinking as a kid, well, like, that's probably not quite true, but like, dude, the first interaction I had with cops, like, I had a party at my house when I was like 15 or 16, and some guy like choked his girlfriend at my house. So it turned into this big thing, and this cop just fucking hated me. And like, I raced dirt bikes as a kid, and we tried building a dirt bike track at my house soon after that. And like, we were making dust, and it was only going to be 1 day of dust. Like, we were building the track with a tractor. After that, the dust was going to be down. Like, we had a system for watering, and it wasn't going to be a problem. And this cop just got a hard on for us. And my dad ended up in the back of a cop car, and we never like, we didn't really know
Jeez.
anything about rights and this type of stuff that we were talking about, even though my mom worked for a criminal defense attorney. So a couple years later, actually, like, it was the summer before my senior year. We had like the hazing ritual in the town that I grew up in, where it's like Dazed and Confused, where the the incoming seniors paddle the first year freshmen essentially, and you just hit them on the butt. And so like we met up with these kids. They came to us. We picked up a couple of them on the side of the road. They jumped in the back of my pickup. We went up to the lake, paddled them, went back to my house, got drunk, hung out in the pool for the day, and like it was all good. And then a couple days later, like the shit just hit the fan. Like one of the moms freaked out and I ended up getting arrested. It was me and 7 of my friends got arrested for paddling 10 kids, and I got charged with 28 felonies
Wow.
as a
That's
17-year-old. You know what I mean? And, like, this cop was
yeah.
trying to destroy our lives, completely destroy our lives, and he would have succeeded if my mom didn't work for a very, very good criminal defense attorney, and, like, none of the other guys in the group had the money to get a lawyer. They were all on public defenders, and they were looking at, like, actual time, felonies, like, going to prison, and finally, like, my lawyer was just like, "You know what? This is fucking bullshit. I'm going to take on everybody in this case and I'm going to represent them for free." And he ended up getting us a deal and everything was reduced to misdemeanors. And like we kind of just got a slap on the wrist and had to do a program. But like looking back on it as an adult, like I didn't really realize how bad that guy was trying to destroy our lives until I was an adult. As a kid, you don't really kind of grasp like what a felony
Right.
does to you, as like an adult.
Right.
You can't own a gun, you can't travel, can't vote. Like all of these things are locking you out of normal society because of something like you did as a 17-year-old. And looking back on it, like and we, like, talked to other cops in town about it. None of the other cops wanted any part of it. The only guy that was in on it was the guy that hated me and wanted to end my life, essentially, and, he was from out of town, and he just wanted to be the chief of police so bad that he decided to destroy a bunch of kids' lives. And like the quote, good cops just were like, yeah, we're not doing anything about this. They didn't step in and
Right.
say this is wrong and you shouldn't be destroying these kids' lives, especially being an out of towner. Like I grew up in a town of 5,000 people. This is a small town where everybody knew everybody. And you've got some outsider coming in just trying to destroy the lives of the locals, you know? And, we got lucky. We got very lucky because he could have definitely destroyed our lives and sent us to prison or, we probably wouldn't have gotten sent to prison. I would imagine that most of them would have gotten, reduced to misdemeanors, but we would have gotten at least 1 felony out of that. Dude, he charged us with 7 counts of criminal conspiracy. I got charged with the
Jeez.
possession of a deadly weapon. They never found the paddle. I burned my paddle the day the first guy got arrested. So where's the weapon? You can't prove that I
Right.
had the fucking weapon. Like possession of something that I don't have possession of. Like, how does that even work out? But the prosecutors were all in on this. They wanted to destroy our lives too. This made national news. Like, I wasn't going to tell my grandparents about it, but they saw it on the
Really
news. Oh, yeah. Like, it was a big freaking thing, and it was a good
interesting.
lesson in like how corrupt law enforcement actually is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a couple friends who I've got one friend, for example, he's a criminal, or he was a criminal defense lawyer for a while. He used to be a cop in Austin, and he would tell me all kinds of interesting things about how he was a relatively good guy. He'd pull people over for DUI and be like, this guy's drunk, but I'm just going to throw his keys in the bushes, and
Yeah.
when he sobers up in the morning, he'll be able to find them. Right? I'm not going to destroy his life. Um, and he was always getting reprimanded for not giving out enough tickets,
Mhm.
and so he would just go give out warnings. But it was, but like seeing that perspective and how, and this was even probably in the 70s, 80s, and how they were trying to push quotas. They're not supposed to have quotas, but they're pushing quotas. But he would say things like, yeah, we always had this thing, you can beat the rap but you can't beat the ride, where
Mhm.
if you don't like somebody, you're going to throw them in the back of the car. Like, you don't have anything to charge them with, but like, what are they going to do? You're going to
Yeah.
take them to jail.
They're
They're going
gonna
to
lose
spend the
their
night
job.
there. They're going to and then because they're not going to show up to work the next
Yep.
day, they might lose their job.
The process is
And
the
it's like,
punishment.
yeah. and it's if you think about like somebody you don't like, you could punch them in the face or like do something else, but like as a cop you can drag them away and make them sit in a cell, which you or I would be charged with kidnapping if we
Yep.
did that to somebody even for a day, right? um and they can do that even when there are
Oh,
no charges and
I got
like
charged with 10 counts of kidnapping in that case. When the kids
jeez.
met at my house, got into my pickup, chose to go with us. Oh, well, there are minors. They can't consent to that. And it's like, come on. 10 counts of
Yeah.
kidnapping? Seriously?
Yeah, so like they some people would say, oh well, that's an unlawful arrest. They would charge those cops. No, they won't.
Yeah,
they
never.
they would never. They don't do that.
Never.
No. Qualified immunity kicks in if they
Yep.
even tried.
That's why
It's
they're never
Yeah,
worried about
it's
getting sued. You see on those body cam videos, it's like, well, I'm going to sue you. And they're like, good luck. Go for it. I
so
don't care. It doesn't
yeah.
affect me in any way. Even
R-
if you win,
right.
I don't
The
care.
city's the city's gonna pay for my lawyer. They're gonna pay
Yeah.
for the damages. Like, yeah, there's like you can't hurt me.
They're the sovereign
And
citizens, like
yeah,
I said. Like
and
they have no repercussions for their actions when they're in a uniform.
right. And think about what that does to a person. Like, what kind of like, there's like there's like a hypothetical question that people's like, if you didn't have to go to prison, what would you do? Right? Would you rob a bank? Would if you could do anything you wanted? And people say things like, oh, I'd rob a bank, and people see that more or less as a victimless crime, right?
Mhm.
It's insured, whatever. Not too many people will say, oh, I'll go around and murder someone, or do something like that.
Yeah.
But then but like you understand that like when there are no consequences for your actions, you would go and do things, right? That you normally would not do. And that's what these people have. So um yeah, so and again, this is why when I get stopped by them, I don't start fights with them.
Yeah.
I wait till we're in. You know and you can do some interesting stuff too. Like whenever I pull over, I make it clear I'm slowing down and pulling over, but I'll keep going for 2 miles if I have to pull into a private parking lot, because they can't always tow your car. Even if they
Yep.
say you can't drive.
Yep.
Which this was an interesting one. I was told by a cop, because I didn't have a license, um, that even though he looked my name and date of birth up, and he put my old expired California license, and he wrote me a ticket. But he told me, you don't have a license, so you can't drive away from here. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll call someone to pick me up. He left. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna drive away from here. But it was interesting that and that ticket was a scam. I never paid it. I never went to court on it. They did. I sent them a debt collection letter. But what was interesting about that one is they actually had a call center at that little. It was this little police station in this little subdivision of San Antonio, where they had a call center where they were calling like, yeah, we just want to see if you wanted to give us a credit card over the phone to pay for that ticket. Like it was like a debt collections,
Yeah.
like they could have outsourced
Pirates.
that stuff to India.
Fucking pirates, man. They just want your
Exactly.
money,
Like
you know?
yeah, it's insane. But Yeah, but that's why, I give them enough that they can follow their procedure. And sometimes I'll leave them stumped, like, oh, I'm trying to help you out. Like, what information can I give you? But it's like, because they're going down their list, and they're like, it says I gotta, step 4, I have to ask you for your driver's license, and you're not refusing.
Dude, that's always
So,
step 1. They want
so
that license so fucking bad, you know?
right?
Like, in those
So
prank catch
so
videos, like, they'll have these people admitting to child porn and all this stuff on their video, and they'll go, hold on a minute. Do you have your license?" And it's like, "Come on, man. The
right.
guy just he's here to rape a child, and all you care about is his license."
Right. Right. Well, if he doesn't have one, we can't. What can we do? Um, but it's insane. Like, yeah, that's their procedure, right? So but it's funny to watch them struggle with that stuff when they're like, you give them a Mexican driver's license, or you tell
Yeah.
them you don't have a license. They're like, I don't know, what do I do? Like, or okay, the next step, so a few steps down, they run the plates on the car, right? Um, nothing, it's not in the system, or there's no plates. We put in the VIN number, it's not in the system. What do we do? Oh my god, we can't, like,
Yeah.
What do like, they just lose their minds because
It's
like,
it's
they
like
don't know what to do
when
at that point.
you know when you like go to McDonald's or something and you're going through the drive-through and you're like, I want a double quarter pounder, no onions, extra ketchup, fries, a large Coke, and a six-piece nugget. And they're like, hold on, hold on, hold on. You said you wanted no onions on that burger because they have no ability to like take in the whole order and like put it in a successional order like after you're done because they're only looking at their computer and the next step. You know what I mean? Like I always
Right,
dealt with this as a bartender. Like somebody would order a big order and people would, wait a minute. Did you want it? Because they're looking at the computer and for the next step in the computer. And
right,
it's like, guys, look away from the computer, listen to what they're saying, take it in, remember it, and then go through, the order afterwards. Where like you're saying, a lot of these people just don't have the ability to do that. So they run into somebody like you who knows what they're doing or somebody who knows the actual law or their rights and their brain just kind of explodes because they have no idea you're going off script. You're not supposed to go off script.
right.
I have a badge and a gun. You listen to what I say. You don't do what you want to do. This is my show, not yours.
Right, right. And at the same time, like you're not like the most important part is you're not like they have their playbook, right? You're not leading them down the
Yep.
playbook where they get to drag you out of the car and
Yep.
shoot you. It's just like there is no playbook for this. What do we do? Oh my god.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, it's really kind of fascinating. But like, to your point too, like they don't want the cops to think for themselves. They want them to follow orders, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine customer service, right? You talk to customer service and like a lot of times you're like, "Man, why is this person so stupid?" They're following a script, right?
Yep.
They don't have like they could be thinking like, "Oh man, I hear what you're saying. I understand your problem. I realize this is really stupid and you shouldn't have to deal with that." But they don't give me access to like
Yeah.
actually fix the problem
And
here. Like,
somebody's listening to this conversation. So if I go off of script, I get in trouble.
right. So there's yeah, it's ridiculous. But then you also have, because they want to make sure you're following the script, they also have these IQ caps, which was challenged, and like this went to the courts. They actually had to like, 'cause people like resisted this. Oh, my IQ is too high. You won't let me be a police officer. Yeah, you can't. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that discrimination against? Well, and this went to the high courts, and they're like, yeah, no, they can if they want an IQ cap, they can do it. They want a bunch of stupid cops
That's so
that's
funny.
somehow that's legal,
That's so
right?
funny because
They
like,
can't discriminate by gender or age or
yeah.
color or anything else, but your IQ.
I was watching body cam videos the other night and one popped up where it was like criminal outsmarted by 200 IQ cop. And I was like, Jesus Christ, dude, there's not a 200 IQ cop in this entire fucking country. And like, I
No.
ended up watching the video because I was like, what is going to happen in this? And the cop didn't do anything. They followed the script and like, they didn't outsmart anybody. The person just fucking narked on themselves
Yeah.
essentially. And it was a scam. It was a scam credit card thing, but it was like, this cop doesn't have a 200 IQ. Get out of here.
Yeah.
There's not a single
It's
200 IQ cop in the country.
yeah. Uh It's what's frustrating, like, so I get it, right? Like if you're posting content on social media, like you have to have like captivating headlines so
Yeah.
people click stuff. But
Yeah.
that's been one of the most irritating things where it's like I see this one all the time. Cops mistakenly stop, they harass an FBI undercover FBI agent, and I'm like, I'm like, I don't know. And then I'm watching it and I'm like, that kid's too young to be in the FBI. And
Yeah.
I start fast forwarding and I'm like, this is total bullshit. And then I start reading the comments and everyone else is saying this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we basically just got tricked into watching this stupid video.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
that doesn't actually have an FBI agent in it. And it sucks that that's the kind of stuff. I guess the other thing we have to watch out for now is AI. I don't know if anyone's posted like these long form AI body cam stops, but I'm sure
Oh,
that's going to be
it's
coming
gonna be
soon.
coming.
But yeah, it's really sad because I know there's like some great content out there that we could all learn from.
Yeah. There's
Um,
some great YouTube
but
channels like The Civil Rights
yeah,
Lawyer and Audit the Audit. Like those are both really good channels that like showcase police interactions and give you like actual real life laws. Like, this is how
Yeah.
you should go through this interaction. This is how you learn your rights. This is when they can and can't ask you for ID, and like those are great for people to like learn their actual rights. But I see a lot of like probably my favorite genre of body cam videos is like fat black women getting arrested at the airport. And you can tell that they've watched some YouTube videos like this, but they don't take in any of the actual
Right.
information. And so they're screaming
Right.
about things that don't apply to the situation that they're in because they've put themselves in a situation where, like, you have to give them your ID at this point because you were screaming and spitting on a TSA agent, you know? Like, there's
Right.
no, "Oh, you can't I'm not giving you my ID. I don't have to. I didn't commit a crime." It's like, "Well, you kinda did," you know?
Yeah, you didn't at first, but you did eventually. No, um, uh, shoot, I had a thought and I just lost it.
Oh, it's okay.
Happens all. Oh, okay. There was a video. Oh, okay. So I see the same thing all the time with people driving without a license, right? They start ranting about like, oh, it's my constitutional right. I'm not driving. I'm traveling. I don't need a license. And they go off and they recite all this stuff. But it's like, okay, that's meaningless to the cop, right? Like,
Yeah.
because like we said, it's like even if it were true, it doesn't mean anything. What's interesting is I saw, and those are the people who always get in the fights, right? And they're angry by the time the cop comes up to their
Yep.
window. Like that'll make him afraid if I'm angry, right?
Yeah.
Um, I saw this one video of this guy, and also let me also throw this in there. This is why I don't recommend people do this because you're not going to watch a couple YouTube videos or like even like a couple hours of studying and understand every possible direction this could go. So you're going to be unprepared. And this video of this guy, he was unprepared, but and I didn't see how it actually ended because the whole thing wasn't uploaded. But the way he handled it was really great, and it also showed something really important. So this cop pulls him over, and he basically says, "I don't have to show you my license. I'm not cool as a cucumber." And he was black, right? Because everyone's like, "Oh, you can't do that if you're black." Cool as a cucumber, and he's like, I wasn't driving. I was traveling. And so this cop, he's like, okay, but you were operating this motor vehicle, right? And this guy, he didn't know how to answer that, right? All he knew is driving and traveling. He didn't know anything about motor vehicles. So he's like, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. He's shrugging. He's like, I'm not gonna say yes or no,
Yeah.
right? Um, Interestingly enough, the cop asked him like 7 times. We can agree that you were operating a motor vehicle, right? Now, this was in, I don't remember if it was Oregon or Georgia or somewhere. But I remember looking up the state when I saw the video and looked up their laws. And in their laws, because each state does it differently, some of them say
Mhm.
driving, some of them say operating. That state was operating a motor vehicle. So if he would have said, "Well, yeah, I was operating a motor vehicle, but I wasn't driving," that cop would have had a confession.
Yeah.
You said you were operating a motor vehicle, and that's what the law says you can't do without a license.
Yeah.
So this cop was, I think he knew about this kind of stuff enough to be like, we just need to get him to say the magic words.
Yeah, he's
So
incriminating
um
himself.
yeah. And it's interesting too, because I hear a lot of people speaking of magic words, people are always like, oh yeah, as sovereign citizens, you just think you're gonna say the magic words and your case is gonna be dismissed. They like I get it, right? Like it's not you're not casting a spell, and that's part of the whole thing, right? You're spelling words. Like there's this whole conspiracy theory on that stuff. But like words, they are kind of magic, right? Because picture like what's the you go to trial, right? And whether or not you did something, the jury comes back in, they hand a note to the judge, and he says either guilty or not guilty. That one little not is a magic fucking word, right? Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this one.
No, yeah, go ahead.
um
Say whatever you want.
that's a magic word, right? Like that's night and day between like what like guilty versus not guilty. Like you're spending 15 years in prison or you're walking free that day. Like that's a big difference. So like, and that's one example of a very magic word. But like when they say how do you plead, you say guilty or not. That's going to change the course of your life right there, depending on what you answer. So the same thing. Like words are like it's not like magic, like there's this mystical like spiritual stuff going on. I mean, some people might call it that, but it's like That's like, it's not like ghosts and everything like manipulating what happens, but it does direct the course of exactly what happens. And if you use specific words, you're basically confessing. So I know it's easy to say you can't just walk in and say these magic words, but to some degree that kind of stuff is true. And that's an important distinction. But yeah, like I said, like there's so many different ways it can go. So it's really important to know, what state you're in. What do those laws say? Um, and one thing I kind of do have planned for the future. One of my upcoming books would be to pull all 50 states and put all the different definitions and everything in there, because that's part of it. But picking them apart, like I've seen some interesting stuff, like in Texas they define, and I think in most states they define a commercial vehicle as a vehicle that's used in commerce, and and then they'll list a bunch of other things,
Yeah.
over 18,000 pounds or like something else. So if it's less than 18,000 pounds, but it's used in commerce, it's not a commercial vehicle. So a taxi cab, which is used in commerce, is not a commercial vehicle, even though it's engaged in commerce. So, what's interesting is if you kind of follow that, again, we're back in a gray area. It's like, okay, so, but if I'm not a taxi cab, does that mean I don't need a license and these licenses only apply to that? And this is an interesting thing about jurisdiction, right? Because you have people think jurisdiction just means like what state you're in, right?
Mhm.
Oh, this state has jurisdiction because that's where the crime happened. But jurisdiction, there's subject matter jurisdiction, there's personal contact jurisdiction, right? Like if I've never met you, I can't sue you over something, because we never could have made an agreement. There's all kinds of jurisdiction. Courts have jurisdiction based on whether or not the case is $10,000 or more. Like it can be small claims, which does not have jurisdiction to hear $1 million case, or regular civil court, which doesn't have jurisdiction to hear $500 cases. Um, but what's a really interesting example, you mentioned working at restaurants. Usually, when you work at a restaurant, you see a sign in the bathroom that says everybody must wash their hands before they return to work. So you're telling me, or else what? You're going to get fired. Is
Yeah.
that's presumably the consequence. So you're telling me, if I'm working somewhere and I take my lunch break, I walk across the street, I go to the restaurant, I eat, I walk into the restroom, I leave without washing my hands, do I still have to face the consequences of being fired for not washing my hands? No, because the presumption is that sign does not have jurisdiction over me as a customer in that restaurant. It has jurisdiction over the employees of that restaurant,
Yeah.
and that's a very important distinction. So and this has a lot to do with the way the tax code is written too, when I get into income tax. But like for motor vehicles, it's like, okay, where does their authority come from? And that determines who they actually have the authority to regulate with these rules, right? So you can say everybody driving a car has to stop at a stop sign, sure, but what if that stop sign is on private property?
Yeah,
Like
I was
there's
thinking
there's
that
no
same
jurisdiction
thing,
for that, right?
I've gotten pulled
So
over for disobeying a stop sign on private property before, and it's like, "Dude, this is a meaningless sign." It's just you can't enforce something that some business just decided to put up and say, "No entrance here. You can't enter the roadway from here." It's like, "Well, who are they to decide?" Like,
right.
that's a public roadway, this is a private roadway. The sign is on private property. That's a meaningless sign. That's no different than like saying, like right now, there's I go to a pharmacy that's at a grocery store. It's at an Albertsons. It's a Save On pharmacy. And during COVID, they changed a couple of the front spots in the store to pickup locations. Like this is where you pick up your online grocery order, right? And nobody uses
Mhm.
that shit anymore. So you've got four spots there that have these signs that say pickup only. And I live in Idaho, so like everybody's really polite and really nice, so nobody ever parks there. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm parking there. Like this is a small parking lot. This place is always packed, and I'm parking in that spot. So I park in that spot every time. And I've gotten a lot of nasty looks for parking in that spot. And I'm like waiting for the day that somebody calls the cops on me for parking there. But it's like, dude, there's nothing you can do. It's a you know, the
It's
ki the store can trespass me for using it if they really want
right,
to,
exactly.
but do they wanna do
Yeah.
that? Like, they're making a lot of money off of me by me getting my prescriptions there every month, so it's
Right.
it's it's one
And
of those things that's just meaningless.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, like the customer's always right, right? Like a lot of these stores, like you see people getting trespassing. They're not, it's not because they parked in a space like that. Like these people sometimes go in there and they're really doing something wild, like
Yeah.
before they get trespassed. Like there was this one guy went, he got 10 of his friends to like put on a red shirt and khakis and walk into a Target and act like they were like the new managers and started ordering people around. And it's like, okay, like that I could see where you're going to get trespassed for it, right? Like you really got to be a nuisance for them to want to do that because at the end of the day, like yeah, they get it. Like it's like when you pick up something off of one shelf and then you're walking over and you see something else that's even better, so you leave
Yeah.
one item on that shelf and you pick up the other one. It's like, oh, we're going to trespass you because you're creating havoc and moving shit
Yeah.
around the store. Like, no, they're just gonna, they go through
Just
and
gonna put
restock
it
the
back.
shelves and clean
Yeah.
stuff up, and that's part of doing business. And they understand you're there to give them money, and that's all they really care about.
Yeah, and
Like for
trespassing
the most
people is
part,
bad for business. You don't know,
yeah,
like, if you're trespassing me, you don't know if I have a wife that is friends with somebody in corporate, you know what I mean? Or, like, there's
right.
just so many different things that can happen when you start trespassing people for bullshit.
Right, right. So yeah, so but I mean, like, but I mean, so it is a legitimate like concern, right? Like they could, but like, yeah, whether or not they're going to is not very likely. But for the police to come in, it's like, do you have the authority from the management of this building to do that, to be here? And it's the same thing I mentioned, like, if you pull into a private lot, and so there was actually a Supreme Court case about whether or not they can tow your car after they've arrested you, and it comes down to whether it's like if it's on the street, right?
Yeah,
If it's on the street, it's blocking traffic and like they can move it. And of course, if they can move it, that means they can open it up and do an inventory, right? It's
yeah,
not an illegal search,
yep,
it's an inventory to make sure you
yep,
don't accuse them later.
yep,
Um, but if it's on private property, well, like I know the owner of this property and he said I can leave it here. Do you know the owner of the property to say that I'm lying? Like, what's
yeah,
what are you going to do? So, and especially if it's like a big Walmart. I think Walmart even has like an open policy of like, you can park and sleep in their lots. Like, there
yeah.
was they had something like that.
Yeah,
So
we used to
it's
park
like
our
yeah,
motorhome in Walmart parking lots when we were traveling to, like, different races when I was a kid. If we're traveling all day and all night to go to, like, Washington or Oregon or something like that from California, and you just wanna stop for a couple hours and sleep, we'd stop at Walmart.
yeah, I'm kids, and I'm sure, but their whole what they were trying to they were like, if you're driving at night and you're getting tired, pull over and use our lots, some kind of like
Yeah,
public service kind of
and
thing. But like
also,
at the same time,
like, there's a
they're like,
good
oh, you're gonna
chance
wake
that
up in the morning.
yeah, there's a good chance that when you wake up in the morning, you're gonna go into Walmart and buy
E
something, you know?
exactly, right? You're gonna hit up the McDonald's or
Yeah.
like, yeah, get some snacks and hit the road. Like, yeah, so they get it, but it's like, yeah, if you pull into a Walmart parking lot, just say, "No, I have permission to be here. I have permission to leave. You can arrest me, but I'm gonna leave my car here, and I have permission from the management
Yeah, and God, that
to
pisses
leave my
them
car
off.
here for a few days."
Yeah,
Um,
I had a situation like that where I moved to Idaho, like, I had just gotten hurt. I got electrocuted working on power lines, so, like, I had my arm amputated,
oof,
and I didn't renew my license, like, fast enough, and I ended up, like, getting my license expired essentially. And I got pulled over
mhm.
one day and I pulled into a private lot and this guy wanted to search my car so bad. For some reason, like cops just look at me and go, "Oh, this guy's doing something wrong." And for a long time in my life, that was a proper assumption. But for many years now, like that has not been the case. And this guy wanted me so bad. He just I could feel, like sometimes you can feel it like this guy just
Yeah,
wants me so fucking bad. And,
right.
I'm parked in this private lot. He's asking to search my car. I'm like, "No, you're not searching my car. Why would I let you search my car?" You know? And, like, I have my dog with me. My dog's barking the whole time, and it's just pissing him off because my dog's barking, and I, like, didn't offer to get out of the car, and he ends up getting me out of the car, but, like, dude, he wanted to search my car so bad, and he did the same thing. "Well, like, I'm gonna tow your car," and I'm like, "No, you're not. I'm in a private lot. The you know, the business is closed for the day where it's a Sunday in Idaho, nobody's open. Like there's no reason for you to tow my car. And he ended up like allowing me to call somebody to give me a ride instead of like arresting me, which he might have been able to
Jeez.
do. I don't fucking know. And he sat across the street from the parking lot. He's like, "I'm gonna, you can't drive if I catch you driving. after, this, like, I'm gonna take you to jail type of thing. And so he like left and I was like, this motherfucker's gonna be watching. I know he is because he wants me so bad. So he like
Right.
circled the block a
He's
couple
hiding around
times
the
and then
corner.
parked across the
Yeah.
street where he thought I couldn't see him. And it's just like, dude, get a life. Go do something useful
Yeah.
with your life. Stop fucking road pirating people. And like, is this really what you signed up to do? Is road pirate people? Like, ugh, my
Yeah.
God. I ended
But
up, I
well,
got,
so it's
go ahead.
you I was gonna say you kinda stumbled on, like, an interesting discovery right there. So, it's actually, if you're driving with a suspended license, it's different in every state, but, like, it's always a much bigger offense if you're driving with a suspended license than if you drive with an expired license.
Yep.
Because basically, if it's expired, they don't have anything to hold over your head, right?
Yep, and I
But
claimed
if
that
it's
I didn't know it was
suspended,
expired. I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know
yeah,
that," I've had medical
that's
issues, I didn't know.
I wanna say that's another that might just be in one state, but there is something like that where, you're they I wanna say maybe this is a California thing, it might not be every state, but your license is not suspended until you've been properly
Yep,
notified
and I knew
that
that.
it's
That's
been
why I said I
suspended.
didn't know
Yeah.
about it.
So, yeah, although maybe that's not for expirations,
I don't know.
like I
I don't
said,
know,
exp
but
like
I wasn't about to
yeah, the
incriminate
penalty
myself and
yeah,
tell them that I knew I
exactly.
was driving with an
Right,
expired
right, right.
license.
Yeah,
What
so,
part of California are you from?
Southern California. I grew up pretty much right outside of LAX.
Okay, right on. I
Um,
lived in,
so
like, the Inland Empire, Temecula, Murrieta area for about
nice,
5 years after high school. Like, I moved down there and raced some dirt bikes and worked at a restaurant for a few years. It was great.
nice, nice. Yeah, it's a nice place to visit. But I
Yep.
once I got out of there, I was like, I'm never going back.
Oh, dude, same
It's
with me.
insane.
I moved to Idaho,
Yeah,
like, I'm going on my 11th year here now, and what happened was, like, I was making a lot of money bartending in San Francisco, and I ended up, like, getting out of it. I kind of got sick of bartending, I would get fed up with it, and I decided, like, I needed more like, a more secure job, so I got into electrical line working, being a lineman. Like, my dad did that, my uncle, my cousin, so, like, it was something that I knew I could get into fairly easy, and so I'm making, like, 6 figures in San Francisco, which is, like, good money for a normal person, but living in San Francisco, it's shit. You can't really have a
yeah,
good
right.
life. And there was no way to like, I was looking at me and my ex-wife for like looking, oh, well, we could buy a house in Petaluma, which is north of San Francisco a little bit, but it's like, then I got to go through that commute and we couldn't find a house for a decent price, even something that was built in the 60s and 70s. And it was just like, you're in this limbo state where if I move out of San Francisco, I'm not going to make nearly as much money as I'm making now. And if I live outside of San Francisco, my life is gonna suffer because I'm gonna have to sit in traffic all fucking day,
Right.
and
3 hours a day. Yeah.
yeah, so I ended up, like, taking a job doing line work in North Dakota, and I, was making, like, 15 bucks an hour, something like that. So when I got hurt, the wage that I was put on through workers' comp was at, like, 15 bucks an hour. So there was just no way to stay in Northern California, and I end up, like, moving to Idaho, and, like, everybody I knew was like, "Why are you moving there? You don't know anybody there, like, it's you're out in the middle of nowhere." And then, like, COVID and all the bullshit started happening in California, and then all those people started, like, moving up here to Idaho, and, I call us refugees, like California refugees at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I started calling myself that at some point. It's and I moved to Texas, so like I have to be careful out there because they hate Californians for the most part. But,
Do you
um,
get any shit living in Mexico? I saw a while back that there was, like, some major protests about, like, Americans living in
yeah,
Mexico working
so
online because they were, like, changing the price of the area and shit like that.
yeah, yeah, that's mostly in I want to say in Mexico City.
Mm,
So yeah, that stuff is interesting, but I think also like there's a couple different things going on there. So like I mean, if you want to talk economics for a minute, like
yeah,
the so like you'll see this. I mean, you saw it in San Francisco, right? Prices go sky high, and this happens anytime you have a lot of people trying to cram into like a really small place,
yeah.
which
The
is
one thing
the
San
cities are
Francisco doesn't have is space.
exactly. So and even Mexico City, like it's big, but like more people are trying to squeeze into it than it was designed to hold, and so that makes prices go up. So so there's that, but then there's also like people start setting up shops, right? And so you have like Americans, Canadians, Europeans setting up shops in Mexico City. and they want to charge prices that they can make a good living on.
Mhm.
So, and then they're buying property and renting it to other people. So yeah, so there's all kinds of problems. Where I am, it's more I don't know if you're familiar with like Cancun,
Yeah.
Tulum. Tulum is kind of like a new growing city. They're starting to do a lot of development, but basically, I think it started a bunch of New York developers came in and started building. There's mixed feelings around here. A lot of people. So you always have this in Mexico, right? You always have this in countries where you have. I hate using the word poor, but you have poorer people in these countries, and they love it whenever tourists come, right? Because they can charge them a lot of money, bring a lot of money into the country, which is great. But it's when their rents start going up that it kind of becomes a problem. So I think where I'm at, that hasn't really been a thing. But yeah, it's definitely, and it's the same thing, man. Like it's like I said, it's people trying to crowd into these cities. Like
Yeah.
it's so weird because like you have the same thing in the United States where people are like, oh, these Mexicans coming in, we got to deport them, and it's like, what do you like? Like, are you really like worried that like are they going to make your rents go up or stuff like this? And there's all kinds of like misconceptions. Like a lot of it always starts with racism and then they build on it with propaganda. So interestingly enough, um, when the United States took California and Arizona and New Mexico and Texas from Mexico, they were actually debating whether or not they should take the rest of Mexico, and they were actually already occupying, I think, all the way down to Mexico City, and they were like, "Let's just take the whole thing." And like some people were like, "No, no, 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 the lower half has all these brown people in it. We don't want it." So like, it's like where the border ended up being is because of racism, and so like a lot of people are like, "I'm not racist. I just think you should come here legally." Okay, well, let's make it easy to like for people to be there legally, and so they make up all these excuses about jobs and all this other stuff, which a lot of it, some of it's debatable, some of it does have impact, but like at the end of the day, most of it's really, really like, if you were to deport everybody, you wouldn't see huge, you'd see a little bit of change at first because you'd have all these, places that aren't being rented, but your development growth and development and everything is going to slow down. Number of customers eating at restaurants is going to go down.
Mhm.
Number of people, paying taxes goes down. Um, so like and then you have rental properties that don't have anybody to put in them, so now you have landlords who are still paying property taxes on places they can't rent.
Yeah.
So like sure there's going to be that in the immediate phase, but then like things adjust, right? People complain about the taxes enough, they come down. People complain about not enough customers, they close down a few businesses, and then the rest, like the number of people and the number of businesses kind of always hits an equilibrium.
Yeah. It fleshes
um
itself out in the
so
market.
yeah. So, a lot of it's kind of driven by propaganda and fear based on, which all just like snowballs from a starting point of racism. And yeah, I'm more of the opinion of like, you know what? If these governments weren't robbing all of us and claiming that we were their sheep and those other sheep belong to the other king, like, nobody would care about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like nobody complains about immigration from California to Idaho or North Carolina to Arizona. Sometimes they complain about California to
They
Texas or New York to Florida,
They
but
they they co we complain about California to Idaho because they come in and they
yeah.
bring their bullshit with them. Like, my aunt just moved
Okay.
here,
So
and she's a crazy liberal,
uh
and, like, people were honking at her for having California license plates, and it was, "Oh, that's so terrible." I'm like, "Nope, I'm all for it." Like, put
so
her on blast. Let her know let her
So
know what the
except for
score is.
California and New York, nobody cares if you go from
Yeah,
one state
yeah,
to another. And it's like, what? Why couldn't the rest of the world be like that? And it's sure there's cultural differences and stuff, but like for the most part, like you're not going to have people jumping all over the world just to like spread their culture somewhere else that's it's not wanted. That's not a realistic thing. Anyways. I know that can be like a whole other
yeah,
conversation for another day. There's a million ways to go with it,
yeah.
but that's my opinion anyway. So
Yeah. Oh, man,
um,
I could talk to you all day. We're a little over an hour now, and we haven't even started talking about taxation and stuff, so I think we should do this again sometime, and we can kinda dig into some
yeah,
other stuff, but, man, I love talking about, like, law enforcement and stuff. It's something that, like, I've been, like, interested and passionate about my whole life because I've been through the system. I know how corrupt it is, and I know like you were talking earlier about like how there's so many back the blue people in this country until they start to have like an actual experience in law enforcement. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I ended
Right.
up going to college after my injury. It was like a retraining thing. And I was doing this communications class, and it was like the only one of the only interesting professors that I had. And like we had to go through like kind of this woke type of stuff, for lack of a better term. And for some reason, like we got into like court systems. And turns out like the guy married an alcoholic, had a kid with her, and she was just a piece of shit. And he went through the whole fucking system, how, the court system is rigged against the man to make it extremely
Hmm.
hard for them to get custody of the kid. And like his kid was suffering, like living with this disgusting woman essentially. And like it was interesting because every other teacher that I had was bought into all the state propaganda essentially. And then this guy had kind of been through it and saw it from the inside. And for some reason, like we had like an honest conversation about like the court systems in the United States and how rigged they are and how biased they are. And it's something that I've been like I said, I've been passionate about it my whole life because I've been through it. Like, I got railroaded as a young kid multiple times, and, like, even, my mom worked for a really good criminal defense attorney. We still didn't really know anything about rights and, like, what was, you know, w what you had the right to say, what you had the right to do, like, that cop had no real right to throw my dad in the back of the cop car for refusing to stop building a dirt bike track. And if we would have went through the proper channels, we could have built that track. It was just one of those things where it was like, well, if we do it again, like we're just going to get in trouble, so we might as well just give up on it type of thing. And looking back on it, like that happened to me during school too. Like I, hated my teachers. I had no respect for them. I thought they were pieces of shit, which they were essentially. Like I didn't want to be there. They didn't want me there. They hated me. I hated them. And I tried to get on homeschool at one point because I had a buddy that got on homeschool at a different school. Um, and like we went into the office to talk to the principal and the administration about it, and they were like, well, no, you don't have a good enough excuse for going on homeschool. And we kind of just left and were like, well, we tried. You know what I mean? And like my parents were
Right.
young. I don't blame them for not knowing that they could have just told these people to fuck off. We're doing it anyways. Like it's not their
Right.
fault, really. Like we weren't really into politics in the state. Like we're into dirt bike racing and sports and stuff like that, which is a good life. But I think now, especially after COVID, people are far more aware of shit like this. Like I think a lot of the back the blue people looked at what was going on in their small towns during COVID and was like, "Oh, these cops don't have our best interests. Like they're going to enforce the regulations and laws of any tyrant that's in office, essentially. Like they don't care. They're going to follow orders. They're going to do what they're going to do regardless like of the actual law and the constitution. Most of these guys, I love it when like auditors will ask them the five elements of the First Amendment and they have no fucking clue. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like you were saying
Yeah. No,
earlier,
there's
like they have no respect for gun rights. Like these people will take pictures on their Instagram of them at the firing range and they'll have "We the People" tattooed on their arm. I love it when you see like a "We the People" tattoo on somebody's arm while they're like beating the shit out of somebody for using their First Amendment right.
right. Yeah, there was you reminded me of this earlier, and just again, there was when one of the big riots were going on, somebody took a picture of a cop at a coffee shop, and it's on the back of his shirt, it had this big, it was like this guy just beating the crap out of someone with a protest behind him, and the shirt said, "We wake up early to beat the crowds." And this was a cop wearing this, like, on
Yeah.
his way to, do riot patrol or
Yeah.
riot duty, whatever. Um, and yeah, it's really insane, but, yeah,
Yeah.
we could
Well, I
definitely
think we should I
go
think
on
we
about
should
this
call it
forever.
here and we'll do this again. We'll talk about taxes cuz I'm right there with you. Taxation is theft. I was talking this is the last thing and then we'll get out of here. I was talking to a buddy a while back about like my injury and how I think things ought to go. Like I got injured, I had to deal with workers' comp, and now I have to, like, deal with disability and all this other bullshit, and I was telling him like, "Look, dude, I think in a just world, like, there would be no disability. There would be no, workers' comp. Like, the company that I worked for would have insurance that would cover something like this because you wouldn't go into a job knowing that you could blow yourself up and lose a hand or lose your life if you weren't taken care of if something like that were to happen. And like, I've had money stolen from me my entire adult life to go into disability and workers' comp and all this bullshit. And like, you're not going to steal my money and then not give it to me when that thing happens. And he was like,
Right.
well, he's a contractor, he's a private contractor. And he was like, well, dude, well, nobody would be able to afford insurance if that was the case. And I was like, no, dude, you're looking at it the wrong way. If they weren't taking 40% of your money every year, you could afford insurance. Like that's just,
Right. Right.
and the reality of it. So
Yeah. No, yeah, man, you're bringing up so many
I
more
know.
thoughts.
I know. I should have
But yeah,
just
we'll
left
save it
that
for
out.
another time.
Yeah, save it for another time. All right, man. It was a pleasure meeting you, and we'll do this again sometime. Take it easy, everybody.
Sounds good.